This is Reverend Don Lewis coming to you from beautiful Florida. And today I wanted to continue our conversation about candles. If you recall, yesterday we had a question from Lady Jin about whether to blow out or snuff candles, and I expressed my preference for snuffing them and my reasons why. By the way, a candle snuffer originally was the set of scissors that were used to trim the wick, and the trimming was called the snuff. Later, the term transferred to an extinguisher that's used to put out a candle. But in its earlier form, it referred to trimming the candle in the days when candles needed to be trimmed. And this is an important point because people, I think, do not realize that candles, like everything else, have evolved through history. And that when you talk about candles hundreds of years ago, they were not quite the same thing we buy in stores today, or even the same sort of thing that we would make today if we make candles. There have been many advances. And that is the crux of the question we're going to deal with today. I saw this question online. It was not actually a question at all, it was a statement, and I have a reaction to it. And even with all the wonderful questions that I have sitting in queue that people have given me in this last couple of weeks, I thought it was appropriate to snag this comment now and again express my opinion about it. I saw it online. I won't mention the name of the person who made the comment, partly because I don't remember it, and partly because I don't think it would be appropriate in the circumstances. But it was a rant, and I think that if you know me, you know that anything that can be called a rant is probably not going to impress me, and this definitely did not. It was all about the poster's great scorn for the younger generation of magical users who, in their opinion, take too many shortcuts and don't do things the right way and blah, 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 get off my magical lawn. And I'm generally not impressed with that attitude. I've seen it way too much in our community. I think it's very destructive. Certainly there are times when people who are newer to the community would benefit from advice or teaching, but never do people benefit from scorn. And they also don't listen to things that are delivered that way. One of the key points that the person making this comment spoke to was how offended they were by the idea that you can use a white candle for any kind of spell, as opposed to specific colors. And they attributed this to younger people being slackers. And that is what I want to speak to. So, obviously, I do not agree with the idea that you should not use white for whatever purpose you would want as a candle. I think that white is an all-purpose candle. That's what I was taught decades ago and how I've always practiced. And yes, of course, there are colors you can use for particular things, but you can always use white. So I don't agree with this poster, and I certainly don't agree with their attitude on the subject. But I want to take a moment and suggest that we all put on our critical thinking caps, and I'm going to ask you to take a moment to consider why I might feel that way. Why do you think I would hold the view that white would be an appropriate color for any candle working? I'll give you a moment. How many licks does it take to get to the center of a conundrum? 1, 2, 3, crunch. So here's the deal. Candles have been around for thousands of years, but they weren't like the ones we use today. The earliest candles were made from animal fat, and they were very smoky and did not smell particularly good. Then beeswax began to be used. It did not get to Western Europe until quite late in the day when all is said and done. They were using those animal fat candles, and they were also more commonly using oil lamps, particularly during the Roman period and well into the Middle Ages and Renaissance. Oil lamps were still widely used, although oil was not as easily available in Europe, and so candles began to become more common, even though the candles that most people had access to, again, were very smoky and smelly. And beeswax candles certainly were being used by the wealthy, by the church, by the court, but not by ordinary people. This situation continued for hundreds of years until people started to come up with new ways to make candles. Our modern candles are usually made from a petroleum-based wax, unless, of course, they're beeswax, which is still in use. And this behaves very differently from animal fat, as you might imagine. One of the things that petroleum-based candles can do is take color very well. As you might imagine, animal fat did not. Beeswax can, but those are modern dyes. And what it comes to is that through most of history, candles, when they were used, were in their natural color, which was a white or off-white or a pale golden color. And it's not that dyed candles were never available, but they were not common until really quite recently. So all the people doing magic through all those centuries, if they were using a candle to do magic, they were not even having the ability to go pick a particular color. They had the candles that they had, most of which would not have taken dye well, the dyes that they had at that time, and so they were white or off-white, or in that family. So anything they wanted to do, that's the candle they used, because those are the candles they had. And if it worked for them, it will work for us. Obviously, they were doing the same things we're doing, and they were working as well for them as they work for us. Of course, there have been advancements, but magic itself has been here all along. So if they could use white for any purpose, a person today certainly can do so as well. And what about this made it important enough for me to feel I should do a vlog on it? And the answer is critical thinking skills. If you know the history of candles, you know that the poster's comment about not using colored candles is ridiculous in light of history. Those colored candles were not there until fairly recently. But so often, people don't stop and think. And very often they use only their own very limited experience and don't try to study other ways of doing things or look into the history of things. And in a case like this, the original poster of that comment looks like a total idiot to anyone who actually has those critical thinking skills or that knowledge of the history of candles. And I'm sure that was not their intention, but it is their result. So the main point of this vlog, in addition to the fact that throughout history people have used white or off-white candles for all magical purposes, the second point is critical thinking skills are very important. Think about things before you assume, because assumptions can often be very wrong if you don't have enough information. And one thing we definitely have today is access to information. And a little study will sometimes avoid a lot of embarrassment. Now, of course, we all do make mistakes. We all do occasionally make misstatements or false assumptions. But the thing that caught my attention was the scorn with which this false assumption was made. And I think, generally speaking, scorn is never a good thing, and really is an attitude we should try to avoid unless truly warranted by truly bad behavior. So those are my thoughts on the subject. I hope you find them helpful, and until next time, may you blessed be.